Hi, welcome to Punchline's Talks, the business breakfast briefers. I'm Marco, and in each week I invite a panel of business experts to review the morning newspapers, find out what's going on in their own individual businesses and their own individual business sectors, and finally, what's caught their eye in this week's Punchline. I've got a fantastic panel of guests, and before I introduce them, let me just thank our sponsors, Hayswood's Accountants and Business Advisors. Absolutely brilliant that they supported us throughout the year. So big thanks to them. So let me introduce you to the panel. We've got Jon Workman, Senior Partner of BPE Solicitors, turnover around £10 million, 120 staff. We've got Jon McGinty, Chief Executive of Gloucester City Council, a budget of £15 million and 250 staff. We have Ian Mean, Director of Business West, ex-editor of the Citizen newspaper, The Echo, the Western Daily Press. He's also chairman of the Organ Donation in Gloucestershire and 10 other trusts as well. And he wears multiple hats, too many to mention here today. Congratulations on your wedding anniversary as well, Ian.
Thank you.
Just thought I'd mention that.
Still on trial after 25 years.
And we have Alastair Correya, co-owner, founder, director, the Tetbury Pet Shop, and he's also the co-owner of Nuts for Pets. Welcome all to the panel. So before we actually start and find out what they've picked out from the newspapers, we better find out what's there. So let me quickly share the screen. What's making the headlines today? Hold on a second. And it never works out as you expect. There we go. Just going to move that little thing out of the way. Okay, says the Daily Express. Don't jump for joy just yet, but the slump to end next year, according to the Daily Express. We got the Daily Telegraph. Lockdown damage to workforce is permanent. The Financial Times. Stocks and bonds rally as investors bet interest rates are close to peak. The Daily Star. You dirt and rotten scoundrels. This is all about the calling them as scumbags for the amount of money they believe that Shell has fleeced from the punters. The Guardian calls for tougher windfall tax after Shell posts obscene record profits of £32 billion. The Times, British Gas banned from force-fitting new meters. And again, the inflation has probably hit its peak, according to the Bank of England. The Eye, energy firms ordered to stop force-fitting prepayment meters in Britain for the poorest homes. The Mirror, Greenwood charges dropped. The Daily Mail, people don't simply vanish into thin air. This is this terrible, sad story of mother of two, Nicole Bully, who has disappeared. The Sun newspaper again has the same thing. Where the hell is our Nicola? Absolutely sad, tragic story. And let's pass it over to Ian. What have you picked out today's headlines, Ian?
Yeah, morning, Mark. Well, in terms of business, I think the Times have done a brilliant job on the British Gas story. Their headline in the Times, British Gas banned from force-fitting new meters. We just heard on the radio, listening to Today this morning, Ofgem has said this has got to end. And this is great work by Paul Morgan-Bentley, who's head of operations at the Times. This is the sort of story that newspapers used to do. A proper investigation. So, you know, very, very good by the Times. In terms of the economy, pretty depressing. You talked about there the lead story in the Telegraph, lockdown damage to workforce is permanent. And they say that the economy is on path to stagnation. And the warning, Bank of England warning, and thousands give up jobs or reach retirement. We're not going to have growth, are we? When, for instance, in Gloucestershire currently, according to the LEP figures we just got, we've got 20,000 vacancies. So there's real concerns there. Inside the Telegraph on their financial pages, threat of permanent stagnation stalks the UK. You mentioned the Daily Mail story, very sad story. With, I think, quite an emotive headline, Mark. People don't simply die, vanish into thin air. That's Nicola Bully. They've got a brilliant 15 questions that need answering here. Well worth a good read there. And other things. I was interested in the Piers Morgan interview with Rishi last night. And if anyone looked at that, an hour-long interview. It was interesting to see Rishi's flat and how that looked. Piers Morgan did ask him, have you, what was it? Something like, he was talking about Coca-Cola. He said, are you still a Coke addict? He hoped to actually get a positive response. That was a can of Coke, of course. But actually, Rishi, I thought, came out of that brilliantly. And as we've got a pet personality on the panel, I thought I'd mention this story in the Times. This is about Larry the cat, the Downing Street cat. Larry is fit to carry on in pursuit of Mr. Squeaker. Apparently, Larry's been a bit in health. They've had to take him to the vet, and he's had treatment for cysts following an illness. So that's the sort of update on Larry the cat.
Thanks, Ben. And do you know what I love about the papers, that, you know, a lot of people don't read them anymore, is that the fact that they can drill in to so much detail that national media don't do anymore, the broadcast media and any other media, really. And as you said, that investigative journalism stuff, that's very expensive. People don't realize how long it takes to same way when we do, you know, we work with you, John, or you've got stories and we're thinking, oh, well, let's have a look at that a little bit deeper. We got a quote from the Liberal Democrats. We got the quote from the Tories. So we've got to get someone from the, you know, and the whole thing takes a lot of time and it costs a lot of money. And anyway, so thanks ever so much. I'm just going to quickly bring us back to interest rates because obviously, you know, we're all in business here. I'm going to bring you in, Alastair. But for you, what's that feeling like for you for interest rates? Does it affect you at all?
Well, I haven't really noticed any. Well, I haven't noticed anything yet. I don't forecast any changes. I mean, all our suppliers we have contracts with, so we're locked into prices for that. So I mean, I guess it's going to be a year's time where we might notice anything changing. But as it stands, nothing. We don't have any debt, so nothing's really worrying us in that point of view.
Okay, great to hear that, John. What about yourself? With the council, you've obviously must have borrowed millions to buy King's Walk, King's Square, the St Oswald's.
So there's 100 million mortgage we're taking out on the King's Quarter development. And so obviously every time the interest rates go up, that becomes a bit more expensive. So viability on King's Quarter regeneration does continue to worry us. But just in terms of the cost of living, I mean, the cost for heating the swimming pool and the leisure centre at Aspire, GL1 and places like that, you know, they've gone up several 100%. And local government association have just written actually to the Chancellor last week because the business energy support scheme that was announced a couple of weeks ago included libraries and museums in the high intensive usage scheme, but excluded leisure centres and swimming pools, which seems bizarre for us. So there's been quite a lot of lobbying going on of government to say, look, swimming pools are vital for the health and well-being of the communities all up and down the country. They're closing everywhere. And, you know, you've really got to include swimming pools in this high intensive energy usage scheme.
But do they count Aspire, because Aspire run Gloucester Swimming Pool, do they count it as a sort of limited company on its own, or do they count it as part of the council?
Well, I mean, in the basic scheme that was announced 2 weeks ago by the Chancellor does allow public sector and private companies to apply for, you know, for business bills, business energy bills. But it doesn't cover a fraction of the actual increase in energy prices.
Okay, well, thanks ever so much for that intake for me. The interest rates there. I'm going to come back to you to do the papers, John, but I'm going to go back over to John from BPE. John, what have you picked out from the papers, please?
Well, in terms of the economy, obviously one of the issues we've got is the massively reduced workforce and the massive amount of vacancies, and the Telegraph, they picked up on a piece of research by the British Chambers of Commerce. So basically, one of the cures for getting people back into the workforce, particularly perhaps trained people who could well be used, is to get childcare right. Whether by tax breaks or whether by grants, more accessible, greater amounts of childcare, and get working people who want to work but have childcare issues back into the workforce.
So is BPE having trouble like everybody else recruiting as well, John?
Well, I mean, Well, yes and no. I think the big issue for firms like ours, we are, as you know, Cheltenham has maintained a position as a regional centre, despite being really quite close to some very big regional centres, so Birmingham, Bristol, Oxford, maybe even Cardiff. I think the border does actually create some structural issues there in terms of where people want to be. But that what people can do now is at least part of the time work from home, and they can work anywhere. In fact, work anywhere in the country for more than we can afford to pay.
Okay.
So getting highly skilled staff. It used to be our location, our culture, and our reputation was enough to get us some really high quality people. Frequently, mums with kids would come back to the home roots in Gloucestershire. That is not as easy as it was, and we're competing for highly skilled staff with a much wider group of people. So yeah, it is an issue. It's an issue. But it's an issue for, I think, any professional services firm outside major city centres.
Okay, well, thanks for that, John. We'll go over to Alastair and then back over to John. Alastair, thanks for joining Punchline Talks for the first time. What have you picked out for us today, please, for the stories?
So I picked out a topic in the Chat GPT, which is essentially, it's a conversational AI. And I think it's really interesting how that's kind of come about over the last 2 months. It's actually just really found out it's got 100 million users within 2 months, which is just astounding.
Can you explain what it is, please, Alastair?
Yeah, it's the trick one. It's a conversational AI. So essentially, it's like a Google search engine. You can input any question or any command, and it'll give you a feedback. So, for example, you could type in, generate me a book outline on how to quit smoking, and it will create 8 different chapters. Within each of those different 8 chapters, it creates a good talking point. So the way we've actually been using this and kind of learning further about it is for helping us write blog articles, creating topics for blog articles, activities to do with your dog, for example. Obviously, we're a dog treat business, and then marketing emails as well. So it's kind of been like a personal assistant. And I think for smaller businesses who potentially who are just starting up and don't have the budget to hire certain people for certain roles, it's not a solution for not hiring people, but it's a really good aid initially to start people getting on that journey of getting outsourced help. I'm
glad you mentioned it, actually, Alastair, because we were talking about this yesterday with a number of PR people, and they're very worried because, not being funny, they're paid to write blogs, they're paid to write stories, they're paid to write decent content. And Ian will appreciate this. It takes a bit of time, and a computer just writing this stuff, it's all about the quality. In the end, you will not be able to tell maybe between someone who's written it with heart and feeling and some computer that's getting no money. But surely they're all going to add up and look the same, aren't they? Won't all your blog posts look the same?
Exactly. So we've done lots of different tests with it and tried different commands, and it does have a very similar pattern and similar structure of how it works. So I don't actually believe it will replace jobs, and that's what a few people are worrying about. I think it's going to be a really good aid to people improving their workflow, improving their productivity. I don't see it as a replacement of people at all.
Okay, all right. Thanks. It was fascinating. We'll keep an eye on that as well. Jon McGinty, we'll come back to you, please. Jon, what have you picked out for the story, just very quickly?
I mean, a couple of sort of extreme differences. This is page 8 of the Eye magazine about the inflation story. It's an article by Paul Wall, and there's some interesting sort of phrases in here. He says, more broadly, whilst 2022 was the year of rising food and energy prices, 2023 is set to be the year of hellish housing costs. So it's these base rate increases and the fact that the generation rent of young people just can't get on the housing ladder. And they said there's a statistics in there that at the last election, 50% of those who voted Conservative had paid off their mortgage. But that means that 50% of those who voted Conservative hadn't paid off their mortgage. So it'll be really interesting to see what all of this base rate stuff is going to do in terms of elections in the coming years. But I suppose in a previous life, I used to produce the inflation statistics for the government. And I was trying to work out just why the rates were going up yesterday, because if you look at the inflation statistics, they are coming down, and the energy prices are, coming down. The food increases that bumped everything up last year is coming down, and the only conclusion I can reach is the one that Ian and John have alluded to, which is the tight labour market. There's just not enough people, and it really is Britain's #1 economic challenge: is how do you get those people that have left the labour market to come back again? It's a real challenge for any sort of government, really, whatever colour of policy. How do you get the inactives back into economic activity?
And I really think, I keep going back to this about the great inheritance. So many people died during COVID. So many people inherited so much money a lot sooner than they normally would. The parents didn't go into care homes. Unfortunately, they passed away, and they inherited all this money, which are actually feeding into the economy, back into grandchildren, and they're paying off their mortgages. Why go back to work when you've just gone through COVID? You've only got maybe 20 years left of your life. You think, no, sod it. I don't know what they're going to do. I think maybe they might have to get some more Eastern Europeans or migrants over. Anyway, let's open that can of worms. Jon, I'm just going to go back over to you, please. BPE solicitors, we touched on it earlier. Can you give us a little bit more info about the company and sort of how you're moving into this year? What's it looking like for the company?
Well, so a brief overview. Largely commercial, regional law firm with national clients, regional clients, local clients. So we have a broad spread. I guess well regarded, punching above weight, etc., is kind of the things that people say about us, and I'm quite proud of. And with some household name clients, doesn't really matter who they are, but Superdry would be one. But how is it going? Well, a lot of our work is transactional, and at the moment, that's holding up. But the thing that I always remember is that if you look at a corporate transaction or a major property transaction, we are some months behind the curve, in the sense that the people generating those deals, whether in corporate finance or in the property markets, they do a lot of hard work before we get anywhere near it. So my question really would be to myself and to them, okay, what's your pipeline? Because that reflects in our pipeline. But in terms of clients we have who are serial acquirers of anything, they're still pretty active. But yeah, with business confidence and with in transactional markets and maybe professional services generally, it's a bit like the Roadrunner, where the coyote is hurtling after the chicken or whatever it is, and chicken stops and the coyote keeps running, and then suddenly realizes nothing beneath it. And that's my worry is always when there's a downturn, how far away are the coyote, how far away the Roadrunner. So that's be interesting to see what happens there. But I mean, broadly speaking, there is work out there. And we're doing it. But
and it's a pretty competitive market as well, isn't it? Let's be honest.
Well, it is. But it's not. I can't see it being more competitive than it was. I mean, it's always been competitive. I guess at the end of the day, although we've talked about technology a bit, and we talked about AI through the morning with Alastair, at the moment, an awful lot of business is still done by people who get on with people, and so we have strong relationships. Some cases going back nearly 3 decades in my case, and I think the relationship-based business is still a thing for people my age and maybe 10 years, maybe 15 years younger. How much, if you take a very long view and AI and greater digital communication, how much people to people is going to matter in, say, 5-10 years? I guess that's a philosophical question, but that's the one that causes me pause for thought, because do the people who are currently terrified of using a phone to have to speak to somebody and wanting to email and thinking that's doing the job, will those people realize it isn't, and they have to talk to people and meet people and rub shoulders and create relationships? Will that happen? Or will we go the other way and people end up in little boxes talking to each other with their keyboards? Don't know.
Okay, thanks ever so much. Absolutely fascinating. Thanks for that, Jon. We're going to go back over to you, Ian. It's funny you talk about people, so it's nice to go over to Ian. Ian, obviously you look after the Business West. What's your sort of take from the people that you talk to, across the county, sort of the business leaders? What are they saying to you about the economy? What's moving forward in 2023?
Well, first of all, I want to agree with Jon. I've known for quite a lot of years about personal relationships. To me, that's the basis of business. It really is and always will be. In terms of Business West, we're the largest chamber in the UK. Not a good feel, and the big issue really is recruitment, and continues to be. I mentioned earlier the LEP have just got some figures out. We've got 20,000 vacancies alone in Gloucestershire, and trying to fill those vacancies, it's extremely difficult. To me, skills is probably the biggest issue we face in Gloucestershire. We need far more investment by the government in skills, particularly young people who are falling through the cracks, so to speak. You know, I've always been a big follower and supporter of apprenticeships, as you know. To get an apprenticeship, you need English and maths. So a lot of kids are leaving school, then they go to college. They still can't actually get those exams. And some people who would be really excellent in certain trades like hospitality and the building trade then disappear. Our young people, the large numbers of them, do not have the sort of ambitions that a lot of us around this table had when we were young. I think that isn't good. The government doesn't seem to have any strategic business plan. We've seen that on energy. We're seeing it on infrastructure. And I think it's worrying. But what we've got in Gloucestershire is some really great firms. And I must talk here about Renshaw, who, you know, your story, I was reading about their record revenues, profits slightly down. But I was interested in what Will Lee said, their chief executive. He was saying basically, and I'll read from your story, we continue to invest in our people, product development and infrastructure to deliver sustainable long-term growth. That's what it's about, isn't it? We've got to invest more. But, you know, this is a company where 95% of their business is for export. They're constantly growing. They're innovative. But, you know, lots of our firms need more encouragement to invest. That's not there at the moment. They're overburdened by a lot of tax regulation, particularly.
I couldn't agree with you more. And there's a fear of hiring a young person as well. And now that people are working from home, who in their right mind is going to have an apprentice when they're working, you know, when they're not in the office with you as well? Thanks ever so much for that great intake. I'm going to go over to Alastair, because Alastair, you're the youngest person in the room today, and your take on how's business really. So let's talk about the pet shop, if you don't mind. How long has it been going? And you run it with your partner Amelia. When did you start the company?
Yeah, so the pet shop's kind of an extension of Nuts with Pets. So we started Nuts with Pets just under 4 years ago. We opened the pet shop in beginning of November. We moved down to Tetbury from Edinburgh in April, and we kind of saw how many dogs there were in the area. Obviously, running a treat brand is kind of what we're looking at and interested in. And we just couldn't miss up the opportunity to open a pet shop in such a busy, vibrant town. And it's been a real success so far. We've been really, really happy. Christmas was amazing, and it's incredible to learn how many people are buying gifts for their dogs. I suspect probably more than they're buying for their partners, and I think there are studies to show that more gifting for dogs than partners or friends. It's really fascinating. But the first 3 months has been really good. January's obviously a bit of a quieter month, but that was kind of expected. But yeah, it's been really excellent so far, and it's been really helpful feeding that information we've learned from the pet shop back into our main business. Kind of having that closeness with the consumer is really important for us.
Can you just talk to us about Nuts for Pets? Because obviously I know about it, but the other guys possibly don't. The people watching it here don't. Can you tell us about Nuts for Pets, please? Because it's peanut butter dog food, isn't it, as well?
Yeah, so peanut butter treat. So we started back in 2019. It was a happy accident. We used to have an Amazon business where we used to resell many different products. One of those products was peanut butter, but it contained palm oil in it, and actually palm oil is very bad for dogs, causes lots of problems, and also has huge environmental impact as well. So essentially, we just recreated it, improved it, and tailored it more towards dogs. So we added a few extra ingredients and removed the palm oil, obviously. we stuck it back on Amazon, didn't really expect too much more to happen. Several months later, a few stores started approaching us, and then a few more stores started approaching us, and then one of the biggest UK pet wholesalers approached us. And then from there, it's kind of grown really well. I think we're in about 450 stores. We supply about 11 different countries. And yeah, we've increased our product range to, I think, 12 different SKUs now. This year, we've probably doubled our revenue each kind of the last 2 years. This year, we're getting some further investment to kind of introduce a subscription plan, and things are looking really positive. And yeah, the pet shop's a good addition to what we've been doing.
And I can imagine you expanding those. I just cannot imagine you just having one shop, mate.
Well, it's a tricky one. We'd love to, but it's a tricky one to get extra investment for. So at the moment, if someone's looking to help us do that, we'll do that. We've got eyes on Salcombe, Bath and Cheltenham for a new store. But at the moment, the more focus is on growing Nuts for Pets first.
I'm not surprised. It's a great store, by the way. If anybody's passing Tetbury, pop in there. You can even have a cup of coffee, and you're allowed to eat these peanut butter pet food yourself, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of believe that everything we make should be good enough for people. We don't believe in a distinction between dog food and human food. If there's a dog food that's not edible by humans, we really don't promote that. And
I'll tell you what, I just want to point out very quickly, this is what I get. I love meeting people. When I go and deliver Punchline magazine all over the county, and I go into people's shops, and I bumped into Amelia, and she told me her story. I just asked a few questions. Then Alastair came out, and just the infectious enthusiasm. And then he started telling me about the 450 stores that we're in. And of course, Ian would appreciate that. Suddenly, you've got a really great story, haven't you? Just I've got to ask you though, one last question. I hope you don't mind. Is what kind of revenue are you at the moment? What's your turnover?
We do about 500,000 this year, and that just to point out, we started with £400 and hadn't had any outside investment, so we flipped that.
Congratulations! I think you want to talk to the Growth Hub as well. They might be able to help you with that investment. Go down to. There's a great one in Cirencester, and Ian can confirm that as well. Thanks ever so much for that. It's fascinating. Jon, let's go back over to you, please. From Gloucester City Council, you've got so much going on. There seems to be building work everywhere. £170 million, the forum moving forward. But really, it's what's very exciting, I believe, is the local plan has been approved. Can you tell us about that, please?
Yes. So, I mean, there is a lot of regeneration going on. But you've got some great videos on your Punchline website, Mark, which I would point people to if they want to see what's happening in the Fleece or in Baker's Quay. But no, it's been a momentous week for Gloucester City Council, because last week, for the first time since early 1980s, we produced a new local plan. So most people's contact with the planning system is when they make a planning application for an extension or a new build or something like that. But the question you have to ask yourself is, when you put in your planning application, how do people judge it? How do the planners judge whether or not to approve it or reject it? And the answer is you have something called a local plan, which sets out all the policies that the planners then have to apply and follow every time there's a planning application for the next 20, 30, 40 years. So we've spent over a decade trying to produce this local plan. It's been a long time coming. And last Thursday, our council approved the new local plan. So basically, all the planning policies that, the things that say, what your broadband has to be like, what your sustainability has to be like. We've got the only policy in the entire country around suicide prevention from tall buildings in our local plan. So this is a very important thing for anyone that's ever going to have any contact with the planning system. And hats off to the people that have been working for decades to get this through the door, because it's quite a tortuous process to produce a local plan. And Gloucester's now got the newest local plan in the country, which we're very proud of.
And Jon, can I talk to you a little bit more about that afterwards, please?
Sure.
That'd be great. Great story. I'd just like to add, by the suicide plan, I'm really interested in. My sister-in-law, who very first day on the job as a policewoman, her very first job was to turn up for a suicide jump from the car park that's now knocked down. What a terrible way to start a day and her career. Thankfully, she's still in there and still loves it, but I can't imagine it myself. Fantastic. Thanks ever so much. Okay, let's go move on to the final bit of the show, actually, is where we all pick something out from this week's Punchline. I'm going to start with you, Jon. What have you picked out from this week's Punch, please?
Which Jon?
Sorry, Jon BPE, Jon. Sorry.
Jon BPE, Jon. That's me, Jon.
That's you, Jon BPE, Jon.
Yeah. I've picked out the bit about going to the new James Martin grill at the Ligon Arms, and I saw the photograph of you shamelessly publicising the Punchline at that event. And it was nice to see you there. Nice to see you there, by the way. But no, that was a really nice event actually. It was yeah, not that. Not that the area is totally short of decent restaurants, but it looks like a very worthy addition and a fantastic location. Nice to see James Martin in the flesh, as it were.
And he was a nice guy, wasn't he? What a nice guy. The one thing that struck me about him was he was a lot bigger than I thought he was. As in man, you know, he's a lot beefier, a lot taller. There's a photograph of me, and I'm kind of doing that, you know, as I'm trying to get him to open my magazine, saying please.
And you were standing on a box.
And I tell you one thing, John, I don't know if you read the rest of the piece, but that man worked the room. My goodness, he was there everywhere, wasn't he, John?
He was, yeah. But the impressive thing about him was, in fact, his I don't know how he got into it, but his classic Ferrari outside, which is but a thing of absolute beauty. But there we are.
Okay, no, thanks ever so much. If you get a chance, guys, have a look at that story. James Martin opens the grill in Broadway. Okay, Ian, I'm going to go to you. What story did you pick out from this week's Punch, please?
Well, I picked out one from yesterday, which I've mentioned already, about Renishaw. Now, Renishaw is our biggest private company, absolute paragon of innovation. And, you know, I'm interested in because the percentage of revenue that your story says derived from exports is actually 95%. Now, that's the way you grow a business, isn't it? I've known them from a lot of years, and you'd be quite amazed that Sir David McMurtry, one of the founders, he's still in. He's mid-80s, still in the office most days in a week. This is a guy who worked for Rolls-Royce and developed the big Olympus engines on Concorde, and he's actually a charismatic character. But the big story here, as I mentioned earlier, is investment. They employ, you know, something over 2,600 people. We need firms like this. It's just a great story in what is a pretty depressing business situation. They are just fantastic, and they are great with their people. They've got a record number of apprentices in all, whether they're degree apprenticeships or whatever.
Okay, thanks so much. I can agree with you more there, Ian. Okay, Alastair, what have you picked out from this week's Punchline? You can't pick your own story, I'm afraid. That was a couple weeks ago.
I have to scribble out that one. It was the Pets at Home one. So Pets at Home with the profits increased. Obviously, it's very relevant for us. It's really nice to see that their profits are increased. I think with the market growing, it's actually not as large as the market growth. So it's quite nice to know that their people are still shopping locally, and it's not all just going to Pets at Home, which is quite nice for us.
With actually no doubt. You know, I go all over the county, and there's still a lot of fantastic little pet shops all over the place, and staffed by wonderful people too. Right, John, what have you picked out from this week's Punchline, please?
Well, I went for quite a random one, which is your story from yesterday about adult Lego for adults for Valentine's Day. I mean, what on earth is going on in the world? So the Lego are now, John Lewis are selling Lego kits for adults to buy each other for Valentine's Day presents, such as Lego bonsai trees and Lego orchids and things like this. And I was thinking, you know, a few years ago, I remember that these colouring books for adults came along, and I was thinking, really? And now it's Lego for adults, and I'm thinking, where next? You know, it's a cracking business idea. Dave, you got something producing these little bricks, and you think, well, why not produce them for adults? I mean, hats off to the person that thought about it. But where are we going to go next, Mark? Is it, you know, we're going to be action men for adults? You know, we're going to dress them in business suits or something?
Hey mate, I'd love an action man with in a little business suit. I'd undress him and dress him and undress him, and you know, all sorts. I'm going to take back that Lego kit that I bought you now. You obviously don't want it, but there we go. I'd just like to say my story of the week was actually a throwback from the weeks before Punchline Talks. It was about Morton Cullingworth, the Morton Cullingworth group. After Morton's, I thought he was very restrained, by the way, in that meeting. We did talk about it beforehand, and he was pretty furious that his planning application had been turned down after 4.5 years of hard work. Worcester County Council had approved it. Gloucestershire officers working the case had recommended it. It went ahead, but it was turned down. He's got a 2.5-year legal fight on his hands now. And it was very, very interesting to hear his side of the story. Obviously, we went back to the council as well and got theirs. But that was a story that broke from his. I just want to say a big thank you to my fantastic panel. A big thank you to our brilliant sponsors, Hazelwood's Accountants and Business Advisors. If you like the show, please like, share, and subscribe. And I just want to say that this week's show is number 99. 99 shows I've done. Next week is my 100th show, which I'm extremely proud of. I'd just like to thank all our brilliant guests who have taken part over the years. And that's it for now. See you next week. Thank you for joining us. Bye.
Yes. Bye.
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 Oh, it's all in the punchline.